This video is going to show you how to frame your blocks and then use the ruler and cutting them to look wonky. So the first step you have to do is to take any of your blocks and sew a 12.5 by 3.5 inch strip to the one side of it. It doesn't matter if it's on any side. I have a couple of blocks here ready to go. The next step is to sew going clockwise around the block. You're going to sew a 15.5 to the right side. I'd like to talk about how you cut a 15.5 inch strip and an 18.5 inch strip and then turn it to get your 3.5. Here I have my fold of my fabric, and here is the salvage edges on my fabric. This is a 15.5 inch strip. I measured from one side to the other and I cut 15.5 inches. Now I'm going to line up my salvage edges and put my fabric back down on my mat. Except I'm going to put it the other way because I'm right-handed and I want to cut right-handed. So here I have the fold of my fabric, and I'm just putting it, accordion folding it to get out of my way. The first thing I'm going to do on this cut edge is to cut my salvages off, because we don't need those in your quilt. Now I'm cutting it right at the salvage. I'm not cutting into my fabric because I need to use all the fabric I can. And this particular mode of fabric has a very wide salvage edge. So I cut just the salvage edges off, get rid of those, and now I'm going to cut 3.5 inches. So I line up on my cut edge. This is my 3.5, 1, 2, 3.5, and I'm going to cut my strips. There, because my fabric is folded, I cut 2 at one time. I'm going to do that again before I reposition my fabric. And there's another, there's 4 of them. Now I'm going to open my fabric up. Remember, here's the fold of my fabric down at this end. And I'm going to cut 3.5 inch strips again. So there's 6. There's 8. I'm going to move my fabric up just a little bit more. 3.5, 10, and the last cut will give me my 12 strips. You should be able to get 12 strips off of your fabric. And here was my fold. I have just a little bit of fold left over, and I cut these wide salvage edges off at the beginning, and I still got 12 strips. So that's how you cut a 15.5 inch strip and then turn it and get your 3.5 inch cuts off of it. You'll do the same thing for the 18.5 inch strip. I have sewn the top one, the 12.5 onto this block, and the one of the 15.5s to the right side. On my other block, I've put on the 3rd round. They're almost getting too big to show on the camera, but here I have the top, 12.5, then a 15.5 on the side, and on the bottom I have a 15.5, and for this last side you'll put an 18.5. Now my blocks came out to 12.5 inches after I constructed them. If yours are a little bit smaller, then you're going to want to make these strips a little bit wider. So instead of cutting them 3.5, you might cut them 3 5/8 or you could go up to 3 and 3 3/4, but I probably wouldn't go any bigger than that. 3 3/4 are assuming that your blocks came out 12 inches instead of 12 1/2. So it should be plenty. Now let's talk about cutting this down. You're going to need a ruler that's 15 1/2. I tried my 15-inch OmniGrid and it's just not quite big enough. So I'm using a 16 1/2-inch quilter's rule, and yes, we do sell these at the shop, so that's what you're going to need. And you're going to, instead of putting it on straight like you would normally trim a block down, we're going to put it wonky. And I have on the back of my ruler, I have masked off with masking tape to the 15 1/2-inch line, since this is a 16 1/2-inch ruler. And I've done that on 2 sides. So now I know that what my ruler is measuring inside the tape is 15 1/2. So I'm putting my ruler on here wonky. I want to make sure that all my inside corners are on top of the pieces that we surrounded the block. And then the next thing I want to make sure is equal distance all the way around is how far off the corner of the block I am. So I'm going to scooch this over till I am 1, 2, 3 black lines off the center of my corner of my block. And I'm going to try and zoom in on that so that you can see what I'm talking about. I have to reposition my camera and zoom in a little. So I am talking about these black lines up to where my tape is. I have 1, 2, and the third one is hitting the corner right here. Now, I'm going to use my handy dandy little Bernina seam guide ruler to measure that distance. And it should be, and it is, 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to make sure I'm 3/4 of an inch off every corner. So I'm going to zoom back out a little so you can see all the corners. Now I'm going to go over to this corner, and with my seam guide, from the corner of that, I'm going to go to the outside edge of my ruler, and I can tilt this just a little bit more. And now I am to the edge of my ruler. From this corner to the edge is a perfect 3/4 of an inch. Then I'm going to come down to this corner, and when I place my seam guide, it's 3/4 of an inch here. And these 2 sides are easy because I can use the black lines that are on the big ruler. But this is perfectly at the 3rd line, 1, 2, 3, hitting the corner. All 4 corners of the 15 1/2-inch measurement is inside the sashing strips I just put around the block. So once I get those measurements, I take a deep breath, and I'm going to cut 2 sides. I'm going to cut the right side, and I'm going to cut the top. So I have 2 of my sides. Then I'm going to turn my block around. I'm going to put my 15 1/2-inch line where my tape is right on the 2 sides that I just cut. Now I don't have to worry about the measurement anymore. I've cut it, I've already measured, and it's going to just come out perfect when I place my ruler here and cut off my other 2 sides. Except I have it a little too far away for me to reach, so I'm going to bring it down towards me a little so I can reach way up there. Line my ruler back up. It was so far away I didn't get a good cut on this first one, so I'm going to trim it up just a little bit more and then trim. Nothing like cutting on camera and not getting a good cut, right? Right. Okay. And there I have my wonky block. So the block itself is wonky, but the outside edges are straight. Now, when I placed this originally on my block, let me, I tilted my ruler this way. Now you want to make 6 of them go tilted towards the left, and 6 of them you will want to tilt it the other way, so that half of your blocks are tilted one way and half of your blocks are tilted the other way. And there we have a wonky block. I have trimmed up 2 of the blocks now. You can tell the one on the right is leaning towards the right hand corner is up high and the left hand corner is down low. And the one on the left hand corner is higher than the right hand corner. It doesn't matter how much twist that you get into yours, how much you leave beyond the tips of the square. You just want to be consistent and have half of your blocks facing to the right and half of your blocks facing to the left.